Heroes and Villains. We were so close! So close. We tripped on the finish line. Hades, Hercules. Chapter 1. The Lady is a Villain Kid. Mal made her way across the sparkling campus of Ordon Prep, taking in the sound of chirping birds, the warmth of the sun against her face, and the sight of the tall castle walls shining with early morning dew. Although Mal wasn't about to burst into song at any moment like some of the princesses and princes who filled this place, she might as well have been singing in her heart. They'd made it! Mal, Evie, and Jay were seniors now. Carlos, who was a junior, still had one more year to rule the school, and in a few months they would graduate. They would be free to make their own futures, forge their own paths. The world was their pearl-bearing oyster. As Mal greeted her friends who were milling about the lawns, she recalled their days on the Isle of the Lost. Not so long ago, Mal had spent her free time spraying graffiti on posters featuring King Beast's face with her signature tag, Evil Lives. Not so long ago, she had been proud of the many, many ways she was wicked. At Dragon Hall, she had been famous for her pranks, locking first years in their Davy Jones locker, starting epic spoiled food fights in the cafeteria, and threatening everyone with Maleficent-style curses if they dared defy her. But it turned out that being evil meant feeling small and petty, while being good meant being brave. It meant facing your fears and standing up for the people who depended on you. Being good was so much harder and so much more satisfying than being bad. It felt good to be good. Who knew? Now Mal was Ordon's hero and protector, ready to transform into her dragon self to defend the kingdom against any villain or monster that would threaten its shores. Life had been calm since Uma had disappeared during Cotillion. There had been no sign of that turquoise-haired sea witch so far. Mal's childhood rival had dived deep into the waves and had not been seen since. But Mal liked to keep watch anyway. You never knew where or when the enemy would strike. Any sign of her? She asked the guard, who had been stationed by the coastline to check. Not today. Good, said Mal. When she arrived at the meeting for the Royal Council, she was the first one there. Today she was dressed simply in a matching black and purple shirt and skirt, her long purple hair tucked behind her ears. Gone were the days when Mal would stomp into class or any assignation at the last minute, snarling and annoyed. She was the future Lady Mal now. Bad fairy heritage, irreverent attitude, battered thick-soled boots, and all. She wanted to make Ben proud of her, and in turn show the kingdom she was proud to wear his school ring. Still, Mal's unexpectedly prompt appearance seemed to surprise Lumiere, who was still fluffing cushions and helping Cogsworth and Mrs. Potts set out the tea service. "Oh, Mal, you're early," said Lumiere, with a bit of a frown. As the head of the king's household, he didn't like to be caught with his candelabras down, so to speak. "Don't mind me," said Mal. "Anything I can do to help?" "No, dear, please be our guest," said Mrs. Potts, bustling over with 2 heaping plates of scones and pastries, almost dropping them in her haste. "Here," said Mal, taking one of the plates away from the overburdened cook and placing it in the middle of the table. "Thank you, dear," said Mrs. Potts, with a relieved smile. "We don't have much time," fretted Cogsworth, who was opening drapes and letting light into the conference room. "The kings and queens will be here shortly, and Fairy Godmother runs a tight ship. She'll turn us all into pumpkins, or worse, back into furniture, if things aren't perfect." "Oh, Cogsworth, you worry too much," Mal laughed as she helped Chip pour tea into everyone's cups. She knew Cogsworth was simply being his normal, nervous self. Fairy Godmother was far too kind to turn anyone into furniture. After they were done with the tea, she helped Chip fold the napkins the way Lumiere taught them. so they resembled ladies' fans on the plates. At last, the room was ready, and at the appointed hour, Mal took her seat as Cogsworth held the door open for King Beast, Queen Belle, King Ben, and Fairy Godmother, who all filed in. They were already deep in discussion. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Ben was saying. "She'll be so thrilled." "I thought she might," said Fairy Godmother, who looked as polished as ever in her pink ruffled shirt and powdered blue suit. Ben grinned and took his seat next to Mal. "Oh, the tea looks lovely, Mrs. Potts," Fairy Godmother said as she picked up her cup. Cogsworth audibly sighed in relief. "One lump or two?" asked Chip, appearing to her elbow as Mrs. Potts beamed behind him. "What's going on?" whispered Mal to Ben. "You'll see," he promised, reaching for a scone. King Beast and Queen Belle, who had recently returned from another all-kingdom cruise, they had become very fond of those, looked deeply tanned and relaxed. Ever since handing over the reins of government to their son, the retired king and queen were only brought in to consult with the royal council. Ben had the final word on every decision. Ben let the assembled group eat and chat for a moment before calling the meeting to order. "Mal, I'm sorry we started this discussion without you, but it's come to my attention that some members of the Royal Council would like for you to do some diplomatic visits around all the kingdoms of Ordon," he explained. "I think you would do an amazing job. What do you think?" "Oh," said Mal, sitting up straighter. "That sounds exciting." "I thought you would say that." Ben smiled at her, but then his brow creased. "Although it does mean a lot of travel," said Ben, "and frankly, I'll miss you." In the back, Mrs. Potts swooned like while Chip giggled. "Ben," said Mal, taking his hand at the table, "I'll always come back to you." Ben smiled back and squeezed her hand. He had grown so much since the crown was first placed on his head. He was their leader, fair and firm, and so handsome that she still blushed when he looked her way. "I'll be waiting," he promised. Fairy Godmother cleared her throat. "It's important that our future Lady Mal see as much of the kingdom as she can. She didn't grow up in Ordon, and it would be good for her to observe the customs of the country." "I agree," said Queen Belle. "The people are curious about Mal and excited to show her how much they appreciate all she's done for Ordon. I know in Northern Way they're planning a dragon dance parade in her honor, and in Corona a festival of sky lanterns." King Beast beamed. "What wonderful news! Dear, do you think our next cruise could take us to Northern Way as well? I've never even seen a dragon dance myself." "I'll make sure of it," said Queen Belle. "Then it's settled," said Fairy Godmother. "I hope it's not too distracting from your studies, my dear, but here is a list of kingdoms for your itinerary." She pushed a piece of paper across the table in Mal's direction. Mal felt her heartbeat speed up in excitement. It was true. She hadn't seen very much of Ordon at all, and the chance to travel the world sounded thrilling after a childhood spent trapped on a remote island. So many things to see, so many people to meet. She glanced at the list. Agrabah, Camelot, Northern Way, Olympus, East Riding, Corona, and everyone else from Tiger's Head to Triton's Bay. So many wonderful places to visit. She couldn't wait to eat beignets with Princess Tiana's family and sip nectar and honey with the gods and goddesses in their palace in the sky. Every kingdom and region in Ordon was represented in her itinerary. Every region, that is, except one. Mal looked up from the paper. "Did we forget to add the Isle of the Lost to this list?" she asked. "The Isle of the Lost?" echoed Fairy Godmother, as if she couldn't quite believe her ears. King Beast and Queen Belle shifted uncomfortably. King Beast coughed, and Queen Belle added 2 more lumps of sugar to her tea. When she brought the cup to her lips, it rattled against the saucer she held underneath it. "The Isle of the Lost is Mal's home," Ben reminded everyone. "Yes, it is," said Mal. It was her duty to represent the island as much as she could, to remind everyone that there were noble hearts everywhere, and that even villain kids could grow up to be good. And the isle is part of Ordon, right? "Technically," Fairy Godmother admitted. "Unfortunately," groused King Beast. Now, dear," said Queen Belle. Then shouldn't I visit the Isle as well, she said. Shouldn't I go there as part of my official itinerary? I don't want them to think they've been forgotten. It was already so easy to dismiss the kids who were imprisoned on the island, punished for their parents' evil deeds. If Ben hadn't felt sympathy for them in the beginning when he made his first proclamation as king, who knew where she would be now? Certainly not in a plush room in the palace eating warm scones on a porcelain plate. Most likely scrounging for leftovers in back alleys like every other Isle kid. Of course not, said Ben. We can't forget the Isle of the Lost. Let's not make a hasty decision just yet, said Fairy Godmother. Why don't we discuss it again at the next meeting of the Royal Council? Give us a little time to think it over. Absolutely, said Ben with a smile. Besides, I'd take any excuse to have more tea and scones from Mrs. Potts.